Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I don't usually talk about this. Hell, I tried real hard to forget it ever happened. Told myself I was overtired, hallucinating, dreaming with my eyes open. But even now, months later, I still wake up some nights gasping for air, my ears straining in the silence, listening for that sound I never want to hear again. The breathing. This all happened last summer. I've been working like a dog for 2 straight years. Barely any time off, barely seeing anyone. I needed to unplug, get away. So I packed up my old hiking gear, drove down to the Washita National Forest, and hiked deeper than I ever had before. I didn't want the popular trails or someplace where a family with a stroller could roll through. I wanted silence, stillness, solitude, and I got it. The hiking took nearly 6 hours. I followed an old, mostly forgotten trail that barely showed up on my topographic map. No markers, no signs. It was perfect. By the time I reached the creek I'd marked out, the sun was already dipping below the trees, painting everything in gold and deepening shadow. I found a flat patch of ground just a few yards from the water, cleared the brush, and pitched my one-person tent. There was no cell service, no human voices, no planes overhead, just the sound of water trickling and the occasional rustle of leaves. At first, it felt like peace. By the time night settled in, though, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The quiet wasn't natural. It wasn't like the soft hush of the woods you expect. It felt watched, like the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting. Still, I forced myself to relax. Cooked up some instant noodles on my camp stove, scribbled a few lines in my journal, then crawled into my tent with a book and a headlamp. I read until my eyes started to droop. Everything was fine, until it wasn't. I don't know what woke me up exactly. One moment I was dreaming, something about swimming under a frozen lake, and the next, I was bolt upright in my sleeping bag, my heart pounding in my throat. It was pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows up your flashlight beam before it reaches the trees. My shirt was soaked in sweat. The tent walls felt like they were pressing in. And the air was wrong. It felt thick, almost syrupy, like I had to work to breathe. And that's when I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Slow. Deep. Just behind me, with a tent wall curved around my back. Inhale. Long drawn out. Exhale. Ragged. Wet. My first thought was bear. Then man. Then nothing. Because none of those fit. Whatever was making that sound was inside the tent. I froze. Every instinct told me not to move, not to make a sound, but I had to be sure. I held my breath, counted to 5. The breathing continued, louder now, closer, almost curious. I don't know what made me do it, but in one quick movement, I grabbed the zipper and yanked it down with a screech. I dove out into the night, scrambled to my feet, and spun around, shining my flashlight directly onto the tent. There was nothing, no movement, no noise, no damage, just my tent sitting there like a deflated balloon, flat, like it had been crushed from the inside. That's when the panic really hit. I ran around the camp, shining the light into every shadow, shouting like a maniac, even though I knew no one would answer. There were no footprints, no snap branches, no signs that anything or anyone had been there. I waited until dawn, sitting on a rock with my back to a tree and my light clutched in my shaking hands. The breathing never came back, but I could still feel it. You know that sensation when someone's staring at you in a crowd? Imagine that, but heavier, like a weight on your soul. When the first bird finally chirped, I packed up faster than I ever have in my life. I didn't fold anything, just shoved into my pack and bolted. The hike back took me less than half the time. I didn't stop for food. I didn't stop to pee. I didn't stop to look over my shoulder, even though I wanted every 5 seconds. I haven't been camping since. Not deep woods, anyway. And the weird part, I checked that trailhead a few weeks ago out of curiosity. It's been closed, completely overgrown, like no one's touched in years. The old markers I followed were gone, vanished, like the forest didn't want anyone else going where I went. Sometimes I still think about what might have happened if I hadn't unzipped that tent. If I just lain there, frozen, waiting for the thing behind me to what? Speak, touch me, take me. I don't know. I don't want to know. But sometimes at night, when everything is quiet and the house is still, I swear I can hear it again, just behind me, breathing. Story 2. My name is Josh. I'm 27, and I haven't stepped foot in the woods since that weekend in Montana. Not for a hike, not for a picnic, not even for a drive through the trees. That trip ruined something in me, and now, whenever I close my eyes, I still hear that whisper. It was supposed to be a simple getaway, me, my girlfriend Rachel, and our friends Brian and Lindsay. We were college friends, now drifting into our adult lives, trying to grasp one last piece of that carefree freedom. We picked a spot deep in the Montana woods, miles away from the nearest signal tower. Rachel found it on some hiking blog, raved about how beautiful and untouched it was. Off the grid, no cell service, no noise. Perfect, right? We got there late Friday afternoon. The sky had that soft orange glow, and the trees were so dense it felt like walking into a storybook, or a nightmare, depending on how you look back at it. We parked the car near a gravel turnoff and hiked a good mile into the woods until we reached a clearing. Set up our tents, built a fire, shared some beers, some laughs, and stories that only made sense to us. The first night was peaceful, just the crackling of the fire and the occasional hoot of an owl. We stayed up late, watching the stars and arguing over constellations. I remember Rachel looking up and saying, "This place feels like it's never been touched." She was right. It had been touched, just not by people. Saturday was uneventful. We hiked a bit, took some pictures, cooked on the fire. It was nice, too nice. Sometimes I think back to that day and wonder if the silence was warning us, like the woods knew what was coming. That night, we stayed up again, sitting around the fire. The woods were darker than I remembered. It felt like the trees had closed in. The shadows danced just a little longer than they should have. I noticed Brian looking over his shoulder more than usual. Lindsay seemed tense, but none of us said anything. No one wanted to admit we were feeling off. Then Rachel's phone rang. It was a FaceTime call. That was the first strange thing. No service, remember? No signal. We'd all turned off our phones because they were useless out there. But her screen lit up, and her ringtone echoed through the trees. The name on the screen? Rachel. Her own number. We all froze. What the hell? Brian said, trying to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. Rachel looked at us, confused, nervous. It's "It's me," she said. "My own number." We thought maybe it was a glitch, some weird ghost call. But still, curiosity wins. It always does. She answered. At first, the screen was black, just total darkness, not even static. But then something slowly faded in. A noose, swinging gently from a tree branch. Back and forth, back and forth. And then, behind it, Rachel's face, or something wearing her face. It was pale, lifeless. The eyes were wide open, staring right at us. But the mouth was twisted into this half smile, like it was trying to remember how humans looked when they were happy. Then came the whisper. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like someone breathing the words directly into the microphone. "One of you doesn't make it out." That's it. That's all it said. Rachel dropped the phone. Not screamed. Dropped it. Like her brain couldn't process what she just saw. Brian picked it up and immediately smashed it against a rock. We didn't talk. Not really. Just doused the fire, grabbed what we could carry, and locked ourselves in a car parked a mile away. Sat there the rest of the night, wide-eyed, shaking, jumping at every snap of a twig or rustle in the bushes. When the sky finally started to lighten, those gray streaks that mean sunrise is coming, we decided to go back for our stuff. It was stupid, but we were trying to convince ourselves it was just some tech glitch, a bad dream, maybe even a prank. We got to the campsite, and that's when we saw it. A thick rope hanging from a tree above our tents, just like in the call. Same loop, same slow swing. The bark above it was scarred, like the rope had been there a long time, but we hadn't seen it the day before. And worst of all, there were no footprints. None. The ground was soft, and we should have seen tracks if someone had come into the site. But the dirt was untouched. We didn't pack anything. Just turned around and ran. Didn't stop until we hit the car and floored out of there. Rachel never got a new phone. She hasn't used one since. Brian stopped speaking to us a few months after. We got a message from his sister saying he'd checked himself into a psychiatric facility after he tried to hang himself in the woods behind their house. Lindsay moved to the city. Avoids nature like it's diseased. And me? I still dream about that face. That twisted version of Rachel. Sometimes I see it when I pass mirrors. Not always. Just sometimes. But the worst part, sometimes my phone rings late at night. FaceTime. From me. Story 3. I don't tell this story often. Not because I'm afraid people won't believe me, but because every time I speak it aloud, I feel like I'm inviting it back in, like saying it gives it life. But it's been 6 years now, and not a night goes by that I don't hear those footsteps again in my mind. It was late October when my younger brother, Evan, and I decided to take a trip out to the Black Hills of South Dakota. We were both going through some rough patches. Life stuff. Evan had just gotten laid off, and I was barely holding it together after a messy divorce. We needed to get away, breathe in some real air, and feel the silence you can only find when civilization is miles behind you. We picked a spot deep in the forest, way off the trail maps. It was a place Evan had heard about from a backpacking group online. A hidden lake with crystal clear water, untouched campsites, and no tourists. You had to hike in with gear and supplies, but we were both experienced campers. This wasn't our first trip into the wild. We hiked in on a Thursday morning. By noon, we were completely cut off. No cell service, no signal, nothing but trees, the trail, and the weight of our own thoughts. We reached the lake by evening, set up our tent a few yards from the water, and cooked a quiet dinner under a sky choked with stars. That first night was peaceful. Still, I slept better than I had in weeks, maybe months. It was the second night that everything changed. We had turned in early, exhausted from the long hike we'd taken during the day. It was colder that night, and the wind had picked up, rustling through the trees like whispers that never quite reached your ears. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up. I didn't know why at first, just that feeling when your body alerts you something's off. I lay there, still as a stone, listening, and then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving around the tent. At first, I thought maybe it was a deer. We'd seen a few the day before, but there was something off about the rhythm of the steps, too heavy, too thoughtful. Not the cautious tread of a grazing animal, but the purposeful movement of someone watching. Then came the sniffing. Not loud, not like a dog. It was slow and shallow, like someone inhaling through their nose right against the tent fabric. Long sniffs, moving slowly around the perimeter. I turned to Evan. He was awake too, wide-eyed, frozen. "I'm out, get the light." He reached for the flashlight at the foot of his sleeping bag. Just as he turned it on, we both heard it, clear, unmistakable, right outside the tent. "Found you." A man's voice, flat, emotionless, but somehow excited, like a kid finding something they've been looking for. I didn't think. My fingers shot to the zipper, pulling it down fast. I stumbled out of the tent into the freezing night air and aimed the flashlight into the trees. What I saw made my brain stumble. He stood about 10 feet away, tall, maybe 6.5 feet, thin, bare-chested despite the cold. His skin was pale, almost gray in the moonlight, and smeared with black handprints across his torso. But it was his face, or what he wore on it, that made my stomach drop. A deer skull, big, weathered, its antlers stretched high and wide, casting twisted shadows across the trees behind him. The empty eye sockets stared back at me like they could still see, and then 2 more figures emerged from the trees, also shirtless, also masked, but their masks weren't deer skulls. One looked like a coyote's jaw stretched over a human face. The other, some kind of bird, feathers matted and dark. They didn't speak. They just stood behind the tall one, still as statues, breathing in sync. Evan stumbled out next to me, holding a hiking knife, but his hand was shaking too badly to hold it steady. I grabbed his arm and whispered, "Run," and we did. God, we ran like hell, through branches that tore our clothes, over rocks and roots that tried to break our ankles. We didn't look back, not once, because we knew they were behind us. You could feel it, like gravity had changed direction and was pulling us toward them. We ran for nearly 2 hours without stopping, guided only by the faint glow of Evan's flashlight and the sheer panic in our chests. We finally found an old forest access road and collapsed behind some rocks, hidden in the shadows, gasping for breath. We stayed there until the sky turned gray. At first light, we retraced our steps, cautiously, back to the campsite. Everything was gone. The tent vanished. Our packs, our food, even our clothes we'd left hanging from a line gone. The only thing left was the fire pit, now filled with water and ash, and something else. A small deer skull, clean, polished, and set gently in the center of a circle made from pine cones. That was it. No footprints, no gear, just the skull. When we made it to the ranger station, about 12 miles out, we were dirty, bruised, and completely rattled. The ranger on duty listened to our story without interrupting, then leaned back in his chair and looked out the window. After a pause, he said, "Ah, the woods have their own people." That was it. Like it was normal. Like it wasn't the most horrifying thing two grown men had ever seen. I never went back. Evan didn't either. We don't talk about it anymore. But sometimes in the dead of night, I swear I hear footsteps outside my window. Slow, crunching, and I hold my breath because I know if I listen long enough, I might hear him say it again. "Found you."